This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kay Savitz. Anthony Dandrea is better known to Atari computer enthusiasts as Anthony Ramos. Anthony published Creepy Caverns, a type-in basic game that was published in Antic magazine's August 1984 issue. Anthony also created the software for Parrot, a $40 sound sampler and playback package that was marketed by Alpha Systems. In this interview, we discuss George Morrison of Alpha Systems and Peter Langston of LucasArts, both of whom I have previously interviewed. This interview took place on April 8th, 2022.
Grew up in a housing project and I went to public school, and I was, from a very young age, I was really into media of all kinds, which at that time, we're talking about the mid 70s, media meant, music on vinyl records, and if you wanted to see any movies or animation, you watched them on TV, or you could get a toy that had a little loop of movie film in it, and hold that up to the light and turn the crank and you would see a cartoon. I had one of those. It was actually my favorite toy, a Snoopy movie viewer. And saved up my pennies and bought a mail order, and I would order them from Kenner and play the movies on the cartridge. But instead of I didn't get them just to watch the little 3-minute clip, of Snoopy or Charlie Brown or whatever. I would play it slowly, forwards and backwards, and just sort of see how the animation was done. I would look at the drawings. I thought it was really amazing to me that you could make drawings move. And I started making my own animated movies on flip books of paper. I would cut the paper up and glue it together and make flip books, and then they made animated cartoons on that. And this was when I was in grade school, like 3rd, 4th grade. Made quite a few of them, and I managed to save a few, even as I still have them in a memory box somewhere.
Nice.
Let's see. When getting into electronics really happened with the arcade craze, around 1979, 1980, arcade video games started showing up, just everywhere, department stores, anywhere you would go. And I was just flabbergasted, this was just amazing. This like virtual world you could make, and you interact with it and like be in it. And I just thought that was amazing. Visiting some friends' houses, when the home games started to come out, I was amazed at that, and played things like the Odyssey 2. But the first one that really grabbed my attention was Adventure on an Atari system. Some friends had an Atari, and just being able to move around in different rooms and just be in this virtual world. I said, boy, this is what I want. This is where I want to be. This is what I want to do.
Nice.
There just wasn't a lot. There wasn't much else really where I grew up. And this is probably going to be a repeating theme. I grew up in a pretty depressed area. It was Northern Ohio in the mid to late 70s. Mm-hmm. Town called Lorain, about 25 miles west of Cleveland. And the main industry there was the port, the steel mill, and the auto plant. So you can guess what happened there around the late 70s and early 80s. Everything just shut down and shipped out, and there just wasn't really anything to do, no work to be had, not much work to be had, or anything really interesting for a young person. So computers in general was kind of a means of escape, sort of mentally and, well, financially too.
How did you get into computers?
The utmost credit needs to go to my mom. My mom raised us alone, me and my sister, on a hairdresser's salary, and which was not much. And she did everything she could. She made use of every available public means to get us an education, to have us experience, the world and things like that. And part of that was when she saw my interest in, video games and computers, she found out that the public library had a TRS-80 Model 3, the black and white computer,
Sure.
and it had a cassette drive. It didn't even have disk drives.
Mm-hmm.
And you could schedule time on it. This is before, for our younger listeners, this is before the internet, before the World Wide Web, before you just go in and, log on. You could schedule 1 hour a week on this computer.
Wow.
So she booked it in for me, and every week for an hour. Well, before the hour, I would prepare. I had a little book I got at Radio Shack of basic programs, and I would just study that and think about what I was going to do when I got my hour. We'd go in there, and I would just type like crazy. And actually made a couple of little games on it, saved them to cassette, and took my cassette home, worked on it again next week. The first one was actually an early version of Motorcycle Jump, which is an Atari game that made it onto, I eventually remade it on the Atari that I had at home. They had they had program examples that were from the teletype days, where you would type in, it would say, you're going to jump, how many buses do you want to jump? And you type in the answer. You can just hear the printer running, printing your answer. And you would type in all these variables, and then it would say, you crashed 80 feet from the landing ramp or something like that. But I looked at that example and said, well, we should, this computer has graphics. We should make a graphics version. I didn't know anything about the arcade game that Atari had made, the black and white games in the 70s. They didn't really reach where I was at that time. I think it was called Stunt Cycle. But not knowing anything about that, I made a graphical version of the Motorcycle Jump basic example.
Nice.
On the TRS-80, and that was really my first animated game. Mm-hmm. And this was when I was, I think, I had to be. This was in '81, so I would have been 13 going on 14. Of course, an hour a week wasn't really enough, and what came next was you'd see the Timex Sinclair computers, in stores. Mm-hmm. And I would go to the store and stand at the display model and write games at the counter until they made me leave. And I said, well, kid, you can't just stand here and write games. Right? You can't just stand here all day. You got to buy something or leave. It's like, okay. So I would whip out my tape recorder and say, just give me a minute. And then I would save what I had done. Eventually, a friend in middle school got one of these Timex computers, and we struck a deal where he would let me borrow it if I would write games for him to play on it. And it was the 2K model, and boy, it was a real challenge trying to make that little computer do anything in 2K, because even the screen memory used some of that. But I ended up writing like a little Space Zap game, and I made a Simon game, made the 15-tile puzzle, a whole bunch of them, at least a half a dozen of them. And the programs were so short, there was no printer, so I would write them down on a little notepad. It was like 3x5 notepad, and the whole program would fit on one sheet of paper in that notepad, like if I used both sides. I wish I still had that notepad, but it's gone. I don't know what happened, but I gave the cassette and the computer back to him, and he enjoyed the games, I guess.
So how did you end up with an Atari?
Well, this is where my mom comes in and saves the day again. Whenever we went shopping, like we would go to Sears to make payments on the appliances, and I see you have a good dog.
I do. I have two. I'm trying to talk one of them up into my lap here, but we'll see.
Well, the first wave of home computers started showing up in department stores, and my mom would bring me on errands to run into Sears and run upstairs to the layaway department and make payments on our appliances, And to do that, I had to go through the electronics section. Well, she ended up waiting a long time sometimes because I would see all the computers there, mm-hmm. And they had the Atari computers set up, running the demonstration cartridge actually in the store that, Atari fans know. And I studied all the computers and the ads, and I said, you know what, this Atari this is the computer for me, because it had the best graphics, the best sound. It seemed somewhat affordable. And somehow, I don't know how she did it. She saved money. I think she even got donations from a church she went to. But eventually, like Christmas of '82, I didn't get the computer on Christmas. I got a note from Santa. It said, the elves are working hard. It's hard to make computers out of paper and glue or something like that, but it should be ready in like a month or two or something like that. And then I got it shortly after. No tape recorder, I couldn't save anything, and no basic cartridge, I couldn't write anything, but there was the computer. She had done it. By that time, I had saved some money from my, I had a sort of a summer job where I would mow the lawns at my grandfather's little fourplex apartment building that he and my grandma had saved up and paid the mortgage on. And I would go there once a week and mow the lawns. It was $10 a week. And having done that for a couple of years, I had saved up enough to buy an Atari 2600 and some games. And this was when I was really into arcade games also before. And I was, going to the library doing the Terrace 80 thing. Once I got the Atari computer, I sold the Atari 2600 and the games, and with that money, I bought a basic cartridge and a cassette recorder. And then I really went to town. One of the first things I programmed was the motorcycle jump game, but this time with cool color, sound effects, funny music, and player missile graphics, all that stuff. I had been. Some of the details are fuzzy, and I'm going to get things out of orders, I think, because it's been a long time. But it's somewhere along the line, I got a subscription to Antic and started learning, programming tips and tricks from there. And I got the book, Programming the 6502 by Rodney Zaks. It's like imprinted in my memory. Because some things I wanted to do, you just couldn't do with BASIC alone. So I started learning a machine language.
Sure.
And which actually, now that I think about it, I wrote some machine language on the Timex Sinclair without any kind of tools. I got it in my head to make Astroblast, the Intellivision game.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So to do the graphics on that,
Astro Smash.
Astro Smash, that's right. Sorry, it was Astroblast on the 2600. Yes, Astro Smash. There was no way to do it in BASIC on the Timex Sinclair. So I started writing it in machine language, Z80 machine language, and I hand assembled it. I wrote a routine to draw the backdrop, the stars and the playfield in machine language, and then I hand assembled it from an opcode list, and it actually worked. I don't know how I did that.
Wow.
And this is, I was in middle school at this time, or maybe the first year of high school. These are the kinds of things you can do when you're a kid and you don't have any other responsibilities, I guess. I didn't do anything else. It was just me and my computer, whatever computer I could get my hands on.
Nice. Okay, so you're programming your first games on your Atari, and making your motorcycle jump and things, and then what?
Well, geez. I was also typing in programs from the Antic magazine, saving them on cassette. It was all on cassette. I still have that cassette. I saved everything on one 90-minute cassette.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a recurring theme. Like, we just didn't have any money. You just had to make the most of what you could get your hands on.
Yeah.
And a lot of that really drove creativity. I had a 16K computer and a cassette drive. I was like, what can I do with it? So I was writing games, running out of memory all the time. Read an Antic article about, here's how you can make your basic programs take up less space. Little tips like, well, you can use variables instead of constants, and use abbreviations for all of the statement and words, you know, like instead of writing set color, you write SE period. You like, you know, put all the statements on one line because each line costs more memory, you know. So I started doing that, and you can see some of that in the Creepy Caverns program. And that's the only reason it fits in 16K. You know, I ran out of memory while I was making it and had to use some of those techniques just to make it fit 16K. But one of the first programs I made, which is actually, I've never really shared, except I think I posted it on Atari Age a little while ago, is I made my own Pac-Man. I had sold my Atari 2600. I was obsessed with Pac-Man. So I started writing it myself in BASIC. And it ran about as fast as you would expect. But I saw fit to add some features that weren't in your typical Pac-Man game. Actually, I'm going to try to fire up the emulator here. And
let's do it.
I'd like to show it to you here, since I've never really shown it to anyone before.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the way the characters drew in is because it would load the character set from the cassette. After you loaded the game and ran it, it would start the tape player and then load the characters, because there wasn't enough RAM to have the characters in the program. Here you get to choose which monsters are going to be in the game. You can turn them on and off. But if you press select for different players, you can take turns being Pac-Man. Player 2 can be the monster, and you take turns being Pac-Man and the monster. I don't have two controls or two people here to show you, but while you're playing, while you're a monster, you have to chase Pac-Man, and if you get eaten, you have to guide your eyes back to the maze. You have to run away and go back to the maze, and if you want to turn back into a monster again. We'll just start a regular game so you can see what it looks like. There we go. So it's Pac-Man in a graphics one screen. The monsters have different personalities. Actually, they have different AI. I was 15 when I made this. This is before Creepy Caverns.
This is pretty nice. The maze looks great. What is this? What mode is this?
Graphics 1 with redefined characters. Hey, I got all 4 ghosts. There's the fruit is there. The fruit is the only thing that's a sprite, actually, because I didn't know how to. I didn't have the skill to animate sprites, you know, because you really need machine language to do that. So I used them for the fruits. There's 2 sprites, and I made the multicolored fruit. Oh, too slow. So anyways, you get the idea.
Nice. So did you show, did your friends play this, or did you try to get this published in a magazine or anything?
Nope. I just made it for myself.
Nice.
I didn't actually know anyone else who had an Atari computer until I was in high school. A couple of years into high school, like I had a small circle of friends who were also into computers, and eventually 1 or 2 of them got Atari computers too, and we would trade things back and forth sometimes. Yeah, again, I mean, computers were kind of really a non-entity back then. Our high school didn't get computers until I was a junior, and then they were Apple IIs. And you know, to me, having had this computer at home, I thought, boy, this is lame. Like, you know, speaker beeps and, you know, kind of low res graphics. It wasn't, you know, but that was, you know, that was my priority. I was all about the audiovisual aspects. I mean, so all we did in that computer class was play pirated games. I'm sorry, like we did some Apple Basic, you know. But mostly it was just playing pirate games. That's what we did. So this one of the other neat things, of course, about the Atari is how when you're loading games from cassette, you can have music or whatever on the other channel playing back while it loads.
Mhm.
And I did that with this Pac-Man game. I made an instruction program, and because it took such a long time to load the main game, I did a little instruction intro, and you press a button to start loading the real game. And then I did a recording of myself with like my stereo in the back playing some music, like explaining how to play the game. I don't know why anyone would need an explanation of how to play Pac-Man.
How do you play Pac-Man? It's so
Yeah,
complicated.
it wasn't really necessary. But I was just excited to, I just wanted to see if I could make it work.
Absolutely. Nice. How did you lay down just one track? Just
If I
left
remember
track?
right, I recorded the music and the audio first on a regular tape recorder. And then when I saved the program over it, but with the erase head taped over. So it wrote the program over over one channel of the audio, but the rest of the audio stayed.
Clever.
Yeah, so that worked, and I still have that tape too.
Nice. Did you do any other projects like that?
No, this was the big one.
Okay.
Before Creepy Caverns, I guess.
So was Creepy Caverns the next thing? Tell me how that came to be.
Well, my friends, my high school friends, we would, were really into video games and computers, and the only real communication we had about them was, magazines. So if anytime anybody got one of the magazines, like Electronic Fun with Computers and Games, or Compute, or Byte, or any of those, they'd bring them to school, and we would share them around and like read them in study hall. And I have to give credit where credit is due, because one of those issues had a game in it that was a dungeon crawler, and had different creatures in it. And I remember that each creature had, like, the more limbs a creature had, the more dangerous it was. So snakes were the least dangerous, and then there were like bipedal creatures, like a golem or something, and then there were these hydras with all these tentacles, and they were the most dangerous. I thought it really fired my imagination. And then I looked at the screenshots though, and it was all just like text characters, like a rogue. And I thought, well, this is a cool idea, but we could do this way better. It was just the germ of the idea. So I started writing a game like that, like just in those initial ideas, and that became Creepy Caverns. I wanted it to be different every time you played it, and I wanted it to have a big ending, like a showdown, with a big boss. I hadn't even seen that in any arcade games. I don't know why I wanted to do that. I guess it was just for the dramatic effect. But I guess I wanted, you're doing all this work and going through all these rooms and collecting things. You should have some kind of big payoff at the end. So yeah, those ideas are what ended up being Creepy Caverns. And just on a whim, and I wanted it to be a commercial program. So like I drew box art for it, and I wrote the like promotional copy and everything. Like I was trying to pretend it was like on the shelf, so I did all that.
Yeah.
And my mom said, you should send this in. This is, if you think it's good enough, you should send it in. So I mailed it to Antic with the drawings. It was my only copy I sent my only drawing. I didn't even have a chance to copy it. And they accepted it. It was really thrilling.
Nice. Neat. So did you write the copy? Did you write the article, or did you that accompanies the game, or did you just submit the game by itself?
Oh no, I wrote the game description, just sort of the intro, and they did use some of my language in the article, like to describe the game. Just that much though. They wrote the whole article. I really appreciated that they used my drawings and that they gave a little background information. Just I made sure to mention that a lot of the things I had learned were from Antic magazine, the sort of as a thank you, and also to kind of grease the wheels a little bit,
So is the art that accompanies the article that says Creepy Caverns at the top, is that yours?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the drawings I made for the game. I think they mentioned that in the article too. That's what I really
Oh,
appreciated.
I must have missed that bit. Neat.
Yeah, they used my drawings and gave me credit. I was so proud.
Huh.
And
Oh
this
yeah,
was
Anthony
the
also provided the drawings that accompany this article. Those are pro quality drawings. That's awesome.
yeah. Well, um, it's okay for being self-taught, I guess. I did a lot of drawing when I was a kid. Mostly it was just copying, like drawing Charlie Brown and Snoopy characters. Um, so I got pretty good at the like comic strip style of drawing and lettering. Um, but again, once the computer became a means of expression, that's pretty much where I was at 100%. Getting that
Nice.
article published is what really got me on my way, because they paid me $400 for it, which
Mm-hmm.
is more money than I'd ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And it enabled me to buy a disk drive and a memory upgrade for the computer. So I bought the Rana 1000 because it was cheap and it had double density, so I could save money buying disks. And I got like an internal no soldering upgrade for 48K. No keyboard replacement though. I just kept on trucking with the membrane keyboard.
All right, whatever works.
Yeah, seriously, basically everything up to this time I had done on the membrane keyboard. I know everybody's like flabbergasted about it now, but like, if you don't know any better and you don't have any better, you just do what you can. This is an article from my local newspaper, from the hometown newspaper, after I got Creepy Caverns published. I'm going to try to show it to you. I could send you a scan if you want to. This is me at the time.
Oh, Sheffield teen plays with tech. How adorable.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, send me a scan of that.
Yeah. That was me at the time after it got published.
So Creepy Caverns was published in August 1984, but you got your drive and you got your memory upgrade, and yet you didn't publish any more games or anything else in Antic after that. Why was that your only one?
Well, yeah, I didn't really go after that because once I had the disk drive, well, there was a long period there after I got the disk drive and the memory expansion where I started getting in touch with some more local users. Like, by then, computers were becoming a little more widespread, and I'd made some friends in neighboring towns who had Atari computers, and we were getting together and sharing, sharing what we had. And I spent a lot of time playing all those shared games that I got from them. That was that really kind of opened the floodgates of like what the computer could do and what was possible in games and just software in general. I actually around this time I got a funny phone call from a high school friend. He called me in a panic. He said, "Hey, the feds are coming after everybody who has copied games. You got to get rid of all your games, man." It's like I gonna said, "Tell me you're going to get rid of all your games." I said, "Okay, yeah, I'm going to get rid of all my games." And he's like, I already got rid of mine. You got to do it, man." And I hung up. It's like, when my mother overheard some of this, she said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to bury them in the backyard, Mom." Of course, I didn't do any of that, but it was kind of funny how, that was pretty serious business back then.
Yeah.
But again, there was no way I was going to be a customer for any of that stuff because I just didn't have the money. I was grateful for the opportunity to see and try all of that stuff, and I did spend a lot of time, just playing. Just really enjoying the kind of escapism of it.
Sure. So what were your go-to games? What were your favorites?
Oh, geez, all of them.
Okay,
So I played everything. Of course, the big names everybody knows: Ball Blazer, Rescue, and Fractalus. I played the pre-release versions, before sort of the beta versions.
The leaked versions, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I got to give a shout out to the local computer store, Software Plus, on Broadway in Lorraine. uh, really helped me like learn about what was out there, like as far as like peripherals and even other computers. They were a little mom and pop shop that had, Commodore 64, Atari, TS and TI-99 stuff like that. And they got me, I made friends with one of the owners, and he would take me out to the local user group meetings in Cleveland. It was a pretty long drive. I didn't have we had a family car, but I wasn't allowed to drive it out there that far. Again, like the car was my mother's lifeline. If anything happened to it, we would have no income. So I would hitch rides with the computer store owner. We'd go to the Cleveland Atari Computer Enthusiasts. It was called CASE. And people would go on stage and do demonstrations. And I thought, well, this is the best. Like I finally, this is like, I have an audience, because I'd always wanted to kind of perform and like show what I could do, like extroverted in that way. But I had terrible stage fright, like there was a school talent show and I like couldn't even bring myself to go on stage. But, I knew that there were things I could do that I wanted to share, but I was too self-conscious to do it. So the computer was a way to perform without being there, if that makes sense. So once I'd gone to these user group meetings, I thought, well, I'm going to like make stuff for that. And that's where a lot of the demos that went into Discape came together. I took some existing demos, enhanced them, made my own, and made this demo disc. Initially, it was just to show in the window of the computer store, to help them sell computers. But then I took that to the user group meeting, and like I got applause, from a crowd. I was over the moon. I couldn't believe it. Like I had made copies to give people who wanted them, and they like asked me to autograph them. It was like a taste of fame or something. And after that, well, what ended up being a commercial product was Parrot.
I want to go back just a sec before we get to Parrot. So what was that disc called?
Discape. So
Discape.
Discape.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
Yeah, I posted it on YouTube a few years ago.
Okay.
And I guess we can put a link in the description of.
Yeah, I would like that. Disc, DISKAPE.
Oh, C. DISCAPE.
Which is a collection of
just a collection
utility
of
programs.
Demos. Yeah, it just runs a bunch of basic demos in a loop.
Nice. All right.
So I did that, and meanwhile at home, I was really getting into what I could do with sound on the computer. I'd written like a little piano program where I could like play the keyboard like an instrument. Learning how the sound registers work and all that, making cool flangy sound effects. And then I ran across that Antic article, I think it's called Talk is Cheap, where you build a little interface and you can feed real audio into your computer.
Yeah.
And boy, I thought that was the best. Because at the time, like I was saying about, I was really interested in media. Living near Cleveland, there were a lot of great music radio stations at the time. Besides the rock station, you have WMMS. There were two what you call urban radio stations, and they were playing basically the cutting edge of electronic music, like electro funk, and what you would call like beatbox music, like the Art of Noise, and all these rap and R&B groups were using like synthesizers and samplers to make like this funky music, and I just loved it. It was my favorite kind of music. And I was just listening, as I listened to it, I realized, these sounds are just recordings, like played faster and slower. If I did that with the computer, then I could make it like a real instrument and like really have a cutting edge sampling instrument. So I started, by this time I had an assembler editor cartridge, and I was starting to write, more elaborate machine language routines. So I took the basic like inputting sound into the computer and wrote a routine that would, play it at different speeds depending on which key you pressed on the keyboard. And I just picked some numbers out of a hat. and then tuned them in. I had like a plastic Casio keyboard at the time, like really cheap toy thing. So I sampled one of its notes, and then I played it back at different speeds and compared it to the other notes on the keyboard. And that's how I found the right speeds to play for the different notes. It was simply trial and error. And I worked that up into a little demo, called it Parrot, and brought that to the Cleveland user group. And that's when another guy who was attending there, named George Morrison, he approached me and said, "How would you like for this to be a commercially released software? I would like to finish and release your software and sell it." And I was like, "Yeah, of course." So I worked on it some more, and that became the Parrot sampler and emulator software, which was sold by Alpha Systems. And Alpha Systems was just George and his girlfriend Helen, operating out of a house in Stowe, Ohio. He had made his way with a book he wrote called the Pirate's Treasure Chest, which was all about, well, it started out as like an informal thing, how to basically defeat copy protection. But then he turned it into something respectable called the Hacker's Treasure Chest, which is, how to create copy protection. So like he took what he had learned and like made it into a respectable product. And he had some other software he was selling too out of there, like MagnaPrint,
Right.
which will like take a screen image and print it real big on your printer.
I was familiar with the book Atari Software Protection Techniques.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
That's what the Hacker's Treasure Chest became. Yeah. So I went home and went to work on Parrot, finishing it up, and George came up with the hardware. I mean, I started at the beginning. It was just an Atari paddle with some electronic additional.
I was going to ask you about that. I was looking at the manual, and for all the world, it looks like an Atari paddle with like a microphone plugged into it.
That's exactly what it is. It's an Atari paddle with has like, just a resistor or transistor or something in it, and a hole drilled in it for the audio input. And he used different case. After a while, there's a different like handheld paddle that he got. I guess it was cheaper than buying a whole paddle set and mangling it up. So yeah, that's how that became a commercial product. And a lot of the sounds that came with it, like I made the program and I made all the sounds that came with it. And a lot of the sounds are just from the songs that I was listening to on the radio. I grabbed those because I had made the program in the first place, was just to sort of, duplicate the cool sounds I was hearing there.
So do you remember what needed to be done to make it a commercial product from where it was when you showed it off at the user group meeting?
I made a few interface improvements. I just made it a little bit more user-friendly as far as, enable the load, like letting you load and save different batches of sounds. And not much. It really could have used a lot more polish. It's not very sophisticated, to be honest. Like the normal speed is 54. There's no rhyme or reason to that number. It's just how many loops, how many timing loops it took to play a recorded sound back at the same speed it was recorded. And if you're in Europe, that number's wrong because they're at 50 hertz over there, and so everything plays too slow. And you can see like European demos that use the sounds will say to like subtract 5 to get the right speed.
So did George pay you a royalty for everyone sold? Do you know?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did get royalties from that. We didn't really. The negotiation was totally informal. I didn't have any adults to help me, but he was fair, and I got something like 10 or 15% of the proceeds. I didn't have to do anything except maintain the software and produce some upgrades.
Nice. Do you have any idea how many Parrots sold? How much money you made?
I never did the math, but I can tell you that I know that there was enough the first few checks added up to something like $5,000, which is, amazing to me that I could do that. And it actually paid for my first semester in college. Shortly after that, I applied to Ohio State University, and me and my Atari computer went to live in a dorm, and it was all expenses paid thanks to Parrot.
Nice. You want to demo it?
Okay, let's see if I can make it work.
I haven't been able to find a Parrot. I have a collection of a lot of esoteric Atari software and Kovacs voice masters and various things, and never have come across a Parrot though.
If you go back to that Antic article, you can just build one. It's just the same thing.
Oh, the talk is cheap? Really?
Yeah, it's the same hardware.
Maybe I'll do that. I'm not good with soldering and building things, but I got to say that I think even I could do the talk is cheap. It looks real easy.
Yeah. Oh, I should mention, like back at that time, I was really, I was into electronics of all kinds, and I had a collection of handheld electronic games. And my grandfather, who also helped me, bought me a set of electronic tools for a birthday. I can't tell you which year it was. Maybe had to be like 12 or 13, probably 13, including a soldering iron. And so I would modify them. I broke more things than I fixed, of course, but I would add little features to my handheld games. Like I added a volume control to one that was particularly loud. I put a switch on one to turn the battery feature on and off or something.
So I'm a little slightly astounded you guys just used the hardware printed in the magazine. It seems so simple. And
that's all it took. I mean, all you really, because the Atari has the analog to digital conversion built in. It's just to read the paddles. In order to read the paddle, an Atari paddle is just a 5K potentiometer, and the hardware looks at the voltage change and then converts it to a digital number. And if you do that fast enough, then you can sample audio. This is compiled BASIC, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even assembly language. It's mostly written in BASIC with a few machine language subroutines. Let me see if I can play this back now. So here's one that's playing. And I mean, this was, absolutely amazing in 1985. I mean, on 8-bit computers, we didn't really have any experience with PCs or Macintosh or anything like that where I was at. And even then, this kind of thing was still new on those computers. I mean, the PC was just making speaker sounds until the Sound Blaster came along. And the Macintosh had like 512K maybe. What else is in here? Oh yeah, one of the first things that I sampled. And I used to record, I captured this audio on a Walkman because anything that was plugged into power line power would create this awful hum,
you get the
60
buzz,
hertz
huh?
hum. So I would use a Walkman with batteries, and it had an adjustable speed. The motor had a tiny exposed screw, and I would turn it down and slow down the motor so that I could sample at higher quality.
Oh,
so run the sound slower.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't sample, there was no adjusting the sample speed other than sampling even slower. So I slowed down the audio so I could get a higher sampling rate.
Clever.
With Parrot in the can, out there being sold, I went off to college, and my first year, I stayed in a dorm, an all male dorm. It was like all guys. My mother saw to this because she didn't want me to get distracted. She thought I would get distracted and not pay attention to school. So she put me in an all male dorm, and which that was actually worse because that was just mayhem. It was like, 1985, 1986, bunch of guys. It was just a big frat party in there all the
Right.
time.
There's no calming influences at all in there.
No, not at all.
Mm.
We had a good old time. And actually the voices, you might have seen, I don't know if you've seen around Creepy Caverns. There's a version of Creepy Caverns with voice samples in it.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, well, I did that. Let me load it up real quick. It should be easy to do. A lot of this stuff has gotten into the Bellcom public domain archives. Fortunately for me, at some point in the 90s, I sent that stuff off to Bellcom and got onto their CD compilation. All right, this should have voice. Let's see. So there's some various samples in here. Actually, if I die again, you might get a different scream.
Nice.
And there's some vocal clips here in here too. Oh man, they're really on me. This game is unfairly hard, and I think that's actually part of its staying power because it makes people really want to, it's not easy to beat. So people that kept coming back to it. I think that might be part of the reason. Oh, there's the chest already. But the reason I bring up the sampled voices now is that the voices you hear in this voice version are all my floor mates from that first year of college. I gathered them all in my dorm room with my Walkman. I just said, I gave them some requests, like I want you to say, get the bloody key. Like let's do a whole round of screaming. And I recorded that and put all my floor mates' voices into the game.
How cool.
I don't know if I'm going to find anything that will trigger another sample. But people can, this is pretty freely available. People can play it. There's a couple of people have made some pretty funny videos. Oh, there we go. Here, let's hear that again. Get the bloody key.
Awesome.
Certainly. Fond memories.
Oh, neat.
So that's probably enough.
Nice.
We had a lot of fun.
That's fun. All right. Maybe you can send me the link to whatever Bellcom disc that's on if you know it, and I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun that year and used Parrot to like play sound effects out the window at Halloween and just silly stuff like that. Screen sharing off. Okay, good. Well, college opened up a whole wide world for me. I got my first experience with 16-bit computers. Computer labs then had like just a room full of Mac Pluses with image writers, and 2 megs of memory maxed out with 2 megs of RAM. And one of the reasons I went to Ohio State is that they were pioneering in computer graphics. Another big exciting thing for me back then was the advances in computer graphics. Going to see the movie Tron was amazing. And there would be TV specials about, all cutting edge computer graphics like fractal landscapes and things people were doing. And I noticed that one of the companies doing a lot of computer graphics was based in Columbus, Ohio. It's called Cranston, Surrey. And so that was one of the reasons I went to Ohio State, was to I wanted to break into computer graphics and make, realistic 3D environments, on the computer. It was amazing. So I started on a track there. They offered an early computer graphics class on Amiga 1000s. This was in 1986, and had a great time with that class. I still have the slides from graphics made in Deluxe Paint, and they had a rudimentary 3D rendering program they had made in-house. It was just vectors, just lines and points, and you would type everything in numerically like they did on Tron, and step through the frames. And to do your final course assignment, you had to take your floppy disk with the animation script on it to Cranston, Surrey, and they had cameras. They had an Amiga set up with a camera on a tripod, and take a picture of the screen for each rendering. Just like they did in the old days. This was still the old days. It was in '86. It wasn't that much later. And my final project was a 3D rendering output to film. I randomly encountered Chris Wedge while I was there. Actually, he came into the front desk to pick something up.
I'm sorry, I don't know who that is.
Oh, okay. Chris Wedge storyboarded the light cycle sequence in Tron.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he and several other people were doing computer graphics research at Ohio State. There was a supercomputer center there where Charles Surrey had founded, and was still working there as professor emeritus, I guess you would say. But unfortunately for me, Cranston, Surrey folded like the year after I got there.
Oh, no.
Well, fortunately, the supercomputer center was still there. And I eventually got a job there as like an assistant sysadmin, like a work study job. So I did not make it through the computer graphics track. The math was just too much for me. Really, really high-end stuff. I even struggled with calculus, I'll be honest. So I had to discontinue that idea, but I could at least do a work study job there and be around everyone and see how it was done. And that was a really exciting time, because you had computer scientists and artists collaborating on short films together. And I really enjoyed that. I really liked seeing the different disciplines sort of grapple and produce something that either side could not or would not have done alone. A lot of famous, I crossed paths with a lot of famous people there. Well, famous in the computer graphics industry. People who went on to work at Pixar, Rhythm and Hughes, SGI, Silicon Graphics. Chris Wedge, as I mentioned, who founded Blue Sky, the movie house that does the Ice Age movies, for example. They all, they all went on to great things. And I was there helping out, backing up doing the daily backups. That was a really fun experience. I guess I should circle back to what was going on with Atari computers. I never really took to the ST line, to be honest. I just felt like it was kind of a lesser version of the Amiga. I really wanted to pursue the Amiga, but that was kind of beyond my means. The Parrot thing, I tried to work on sequels and upgrades to it, but honestly, I got too carried away with college life. Basically, women and drinking. And that kind of put me off the map for a few years, to where I left school and was just sort of, I was just out there living life away from university and school and even computers for a while.
Sure. You're not the first person to tell me that their Atari story ends when they discovered, the opposite sex and liquor.
Well, it certainly was a big interruption. But the funny, I did still stick with it, actually. I mean, I got some later stuff here that I could share with you of
Sure.
Advanced Music System music that I made. And another one that got into the Belcom library called Life, where I never really stopped sort of really being into my Atari 8-bit computer. It was always kind of, there was an undercurrent of it going on, and I would, I kept pursuing programming on it. Doing the programs would be the mix between basic and machine language. Like the machine language I kept trying to do more and more of that to where I could just finally shed basic and, make proper machine language programs. And one of the culminations of that, I'm going to try to load up another thing here for you.
Yeah.
So while I was taking a break from school and programming, I was kind of investigating music a little bit. I had a synthesizer, and I bought some sheet music books from the local music store. So do stuff like this. Let's see. Just from reading music in a book, pretty easy. And did everybody has to do a well-tempered clavier one. You get the idea. But then I got to, then I wanted to do some things that were not necessarily in the sheet music, like just getting fancy with effects in AMS as best I could. So like this one. This is like a Pink Floyd song, but I'm like, it's like, none of this is in the sheet music. It's all like effects that they added to the song.
Like space jazz or something.
Yeah. And so on. And that culminated in, a lot of these are unfinished. Some of these are done, some are unfinished. And like, this is probably the last one I did that was the most elaborate. It's short enough that we could just play it.
Sure. What's it called? Pinkle Thams? What's it?
Pink Elephants.
Pink Elephants, sorry. Nice. Oh, neat.
And that one and some other ones I did without any sheet music. That was just listening to the recording and just figuring it out, just playing by ear. Actually, that one and some other ones. I did.
How fun.
I probably could have been like, I don't know, if I had applied myself, I probably could have learned to play the piano more like seriously, like reading from sheet music. I had the interest for sure. But again, I was too self-conscious to like be seen performing. So I just performed via the computer. The Atari was really my outlet for like all kinds of music and graphics performances, basically.
Nice.
But as I was saying, programming getting better at programming enough to write machine language programs, I made a game called Life, which was, Conway's Game of Life, you know?
Sure.
Which isn't that unusual. Lots of people have done it. But I wanted to make like a desktop interface for it. And what I came up with, this is a few years on, you can see, sort of after my self-imposed break.
1989, okay.
Had to have some little musical accompaniment. That's Raymond
This
Scott's.
is a lot of intro for the Conway's Life, man.
Yeah, well. So let's get out of this. I think the space key is going to be the trigger. Let's see.
It's usually tab.
Tab? Oh, you know what? I need to enable the joystick probably. Oh, there it is. Yes, it's the shift button. So right away, I'm telling you.
So you made a whole like mouse-driven menuing system?
Yep. The game was just sort of an excuse to do this. So it's like a whole, pointers, menus. It functions a lot like the Macintosh at the time. So let's see. Go to the disk. Or you can use joystick to draw the life dots. And set hit go, and it starts going through the iterations. You can change the speed. And if I remember right, go tiny cells. Now you've got this many. This program still has some basic in it, but at this point, it's just sort of the glue that holds all the machine language together.
Sure, yeah. How nice! What a neat program.
Thanks. And you can read about like info here, like background on Life.
So was this published on Belcom or whatever?
Yeah, I think this made it into Belcom. Let me see here. Oh yeah, there's a note in here. Please write me. I don't know why I always did this. Like any program I wrote, send me a letter. And I have my
I'm
address
lonely.
right in there.
Be my Atari friend.
Will someone please be my friend? I don't know anyone else who does this.
Nice.
Oh yeah, this is kind of a cute one. I did my research. I made sure that all the interesting aspects of life were included in the program. But the big significance for this for me was I made this I made this like the year before I started working at the Supercomputer Center, and through sort of a chance meeting, someone was there for a presentation, and I met them, and they were worked at a local design studio. I'll stop this now. They were working at a local design studio that was starting an interface group, as they called it. So a design house that, would do product design, graphic design, those sorts of things. And they wanted to start sort of an interactive group. And they asked if I would come and try out to be sort of a technical member of the team. And not knowing anything about it, I said, okay, so I thought, well, what's the most advanced thing I've done that I could show these people? And it was really this life interface that I made. So I recorded myself using it on VHS, because I wasn't going to haul my computer over there, my hopelessly out of date Atari computer at that by then, I recorded the footage of me using it and went to the studio, and they liked it enough to hire me on. They thought I was up to the task. And what, unbeknownst to me, I had just been hired at Fitch Incorporated, which is, as I found out, a massive comprehensive design house, like the kind of place where multinational corporations go to get a massive rebranding done, or like roll out a new product, or even an entire series of stores for their products. It's just a massive complex of buildings just nestled up in the hills on the outskirts of Columbus. Any one building there could have been a design studio by itself. You walk through the interconnected rooms, and there would be, here's the industrial design where they're fabricating the housings for the product. Here's the interior design where they're designing the storefront. Here's the retail design where they're doing the packaging, and it just went on and on like that. And I walked into this not knowing anything about design, the design industry or profession, and sat down amongst 5 other people. And we were the new interface group that was going to work on user interface and interactive media. And the tools of the time were Macromind Director, Photoshop 2.5, which did not have layers yet. And we're using, top of the line Macintosh computers, and I'm working with like people with doctorates, and it was just all incredible, an incredible trial by fire. I was baptized in the world of design at that point. This was 1994, I think.
Wow.
I joined on. Still on hiatus from college.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked on stuff for, let's see. Early on, I was helping like user interface people sort of mock up interfaces for test groups, like in a test setting, like a new interface for say a stereo component. They would mock it up on the computer and have people come into a room, with mirrored windows and the whole works, and they would try the interface, try to do different things with the interface and see how functional it was for them. And eventually we went on to do multimedia, like disk-based multimedia for demonstrations. Let's see, did some work for General Electric, did a line of interactive lessons for like all about computer science for like a remote learning company. Probably the biggest project I was involved in was the iOmega zip and jazz drives. You remember those.
Sure.
Because I was one of the few people who had used their previous products at the Supercomputer Center. Before then, iOmega had their Bernoulli drives, and they were competing with SciQuest. SciQuest's, enclosed hard drives, which was dominating the industry. So I told them everything I didn't like about the Bernoulli drive, how they could, and how they should change it. And between that and a lot of other people working on it, Fitch Incorporated came up with the branding and the product concept of the zip drive. And I even got to work on it a little bit. I worked on the multimedia tour that came with the drives. So again, I just sort of jumped in feet first into a massive design house, and got in on the early days of the web. Worked on websites there in 1996. Did interactive media CDs. CD-ROM was still big then. Won some awards. Did work for a lot of companies. And I was there from 94 until about 98. And that kind of started a career in multimedia development and what I called interaction design. There wasn't really any like concept of UX like we have now. So I just called it interaction design. Coming into such a big firm, they had a lot of kind of established procedures and people who were, they were in the, they'd been in the design field for a long time. They had degrees in it, graphic designers, product designers. But what was missing there was the sort of the interaction aspect of the sort of, the interplay between a user and like, an electronic device. They were all about, how does it look? What do we want to tell the customer? And where they kind of needed to get up to speed was, how do we interact with the customer? How do we make things that are easy to use, fun to use? And really everything I had done on my Atari computers had kind of prepared me for this point, because not just how to make things on the computer, but what it's, how they what it's like to use them, like how they work.
Yeah.
Just sort of that language of interaction I was able to bring to the table, and it really helped. I mean, I used what I learned on my Atari computers almost every day in that job, in making multimedia. Things like file formats, graphics formats, how to balance, information you're giving the user to like accepting their input and acting on it, those sorts of things. It was just like, it just came naturally to me because of my growing up with like Atari games and computers.
Nice. Wow. Great. Let's jump ahead. What do you do these days?
Well, after Fitch, I went on to, actually, it became a little stifling because of the massive, the projects and the clients were so massive that you didn't really have a lot of creative input. So I ended up going to sort of a more self-contained studio that focused on like interactive media called Studio Motive, and did some projects there for like websites, interactive CD-ROMs. Did some work for Dewar's Whiskey. I did an interactive like database app for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, things like that. Then I wanted a change of scenery. So in 2000, I moved to Portland and did that work freelance for a while. Did some work for the old studio from Portland. Who did some work on contract for local designers here. But the bottom kind of dropped out of the whole, the .com boom and interactive media, sort of kind of went away for a while there. So I kind of floated around looking for something to do. And one of the reasons I moved to Portland was like an arcade and store called Ground Control, which was run by a couple who they had arcade games, and they were selling old computers, ancient computers, like Atari 8-bit computers, and game systems.
Also, one of the reasons I moved to Portland is Ground Control.
Yeah. So and I started hanging out there a lot and sort of helping them with what I knew as far as fixing things. And as time went on, they asked me if they said that they wanted to move on and do something else, and would I like to take over the business? I wasn't sure how to do that. I didn't have the funds or anything. I didn't have any business background. So I sort of cast around and looked for local people in the arcade, in the arcade scene. And as it happens, Clay Cowgill and Neil Bradley were local, and they had done a lot of work in like fabricating new parts for arcade games, writing emulators and things like that. So I met with them, and they each brought in one of their partners, and we formed a partnership and took over the business, bought out Ground Control. And it was pretty small at first. We just it was me and 2 employees down there in 2003. We closed at 10. There was no alcohol service or anything. But gradually we built it up. We sort of moved things into the future a little bit, started bringing in the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, even PlayStation, stuff like that, bringing in newer games. And I've been with it ever since, actually. I mean, we're coming up on, we just celebrated Ground Control's 20th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Before the pandemic hit in 2019. Yeah, that was 20 years. And so I've been doing that. I haven't really been programming. I've gotten more interested in, I kind of stayed in the 8-bit era, to be honest, all this time. I've just gotten more into the hardware side now. Like I troubleshoot arcade boards, the older classics. I like to keep them around. Learned about CRT monitors, how they work, and maintaining those. It's been a lot of fun. I got married in 2011, and I have 2 kids now. James is 9 and Faye is 6. My wife started her own business during the pandemic. During the pandemic, Ground Control was closed for 18 months. That was our only source of income at the time. So she started a business using her sewing skills and created a product that turned out to be very popular and has kept us going. So
nice. What's the product?
She made a water. There's a play couch system. I'll make sure I get this right. It's a children's play couch system. It's made out of foam shapes. It's big foam shapes, and you cover them with like a micro suede fiber. And they're firm enough that you can stack them and make sort of, make forts and like bounce mats out of them. And the covers make them sort of stick together because they're sort of a suede material. She came up with a waterproof liner for them because, kids have accidents, and if the foam gets wet, it's pretty much ruined. If you spill anything nasty on it, the foam it never comes out. And these foam couch systems are pretty expensive. So she came up with this waterproof liner for herself, just for our set. And then people started asking her for more. So she started making more. And pretty soon it became kind of an industry. We've been operating out of our house.
Nice.
So now we have both of those things going on. She's doing her liner business, and I've been helping to operate and manage Ground Control.
Which is back up now for the last few months, as I recall.
Yeah, it's been coming back. We're not 100% back, but it keeps getting better. I hope that if we can keep the virus under control,
nice.
We can get back to something like normal.
I bet that more than one listener to this podcast has dreamed, fantasized about owning a barcade or having a arcade that they could run. But tell me something surprising about it. Something that why does it suck, or what is surprising about that the person who doesn't know might not know about running an arcade?
Okay, well, there's the way you imagine it being, in your ideal dream scenario, and then there's the reality. There are definitely differences. One big difference is the games you love are not going to be the games that make the most money, generally speaking. It's a happy accident when that happens, but depending on your age, we all sort of imprint on our early teens. That's just human nature.
Yeah.
And so we have nostalgia for those things, and the time to act on your nostalgia is like your late 20s, early 30s. People start being like, man, I want to get that stuff back that I loved as a kid. So, but as you get older, they recedes further and further into the past. So like what I fixated on is the ancient history by now, the early 80s. So, those games from the early 80s, they have, Tempest, Frogger, Pac-Man, they have big name recognition. But when the weekend crowd comes in, those are not the games they put the most quarters into. They're looking for they're generally, people who are looking for a night out and have disposable income. They're younger than you or I, and they're looking for stuff that they grew up with, or even the latest greatest thing. So you have to kind of, your games won't be as well loved as you think they should be, and you just have to live with it. It's like, okay, these are my favorites, and you keep them around as sort of a charity case for the owners, but the newest, hottest games are the ones that are actually making the most money.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't even, some of the newer games I haven't even played at all, not even once.
So what are the big earners right now?
Right at this moment,
Yeah.
well, we've got a big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reboot,
Mm-hmm.
That Raw Thrills put out a few years ago. That's a hot one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Walking Dead sort of theater
Mm-hmm.
game that you sit inside. It's very immersive. That's another hot one. We've got a 10-player game called Killer Queen.
Oh, Killer Queen's great.
Yeah, that's got a great community around it. But, again, I've like played those games incidentally just to see what they're like.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll always love the early 80s games.
Sure.
But it is important to have them around. They're more of a promotional. They enhance the environment. You know what I mean? People just like knowing they're there and seeing them, even if they don't play them that much.
Sure.
But that's where my heart is. Like, it is a business, and you can't always just do what you feel like. Like
Right.
I've seen the little boutiques try to do that, and
Mm-hmm.
they just don't last.
Yeah.
Because you have to follow the money. So that's the biggest thing. It's like there is a caveat to doing what you love.
Yeah. I've often wondered, is the real money in the bar? Is it a bar with games?
Financially, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about half. I would say it's half and half, actually.
Yeah.
We're really good about, we work really hard at optimizing the arcade so that they're priced right, and we have the right mix of games to make, for the arcade to sustain itself. Even if there wasn't a bar, the arcade would survive. It just wouldn't be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of need both. And I don't see them in competition, because really you're catering to grown-up tastes, basically. That the kid in us has grown up, and now, when we have a night out, we want to have a beer in our hand while we enjoy our classic games.
Sure.
So they're really two parts of a whole to me.
Fair enough.
As far as I guess I want to say something about where I want to go from here.
Yeah. Please.
Really enjoying getting into the lower level aspects of hardware, specifically arcade hardware. It's kind of fun to imagine that, like, travel back in time to like being a developer at that time. When I was just a kid growing up, what it must have been like for the people who were adults, and actually developing stone cold classics like Tempest and so on. And so I'm working towards improving my machine language skills even further, like hoping to like contribute to the arcade mod community as it is. I mean, Clay is already like a figurehead in that. I mean, he's developed all kinds of add-ons and upgrades, software and hardware. I think Neil's contributed some too. And I would like to join that sort of pantheon of like, upgrading and improving the classic arcade games. But to do that, I'm going to have to beef up my skills on like assembly language programming. And
can you give me examples of the ways the community is doing that? The one that comes to mind, and really the only one I can think of, is when someone a few years ago made the version of Donkey Kong where you play as Pauline instead of as Mario.
Yeah, Clay did that.
Oh, is that Clay? Oh,
yeah, Clay did that. That's a ground control original.
Oh, if I knew that, I forgot. Neat.
Yeah, that's a ground control original. It's a shame we don't have that cabinet in the arcade yet, but we're working on it. But yeah, basically doing homebrew mods of arcade games, adding features that were missing. Like a lot of arcade games, when you put them in free play mode, they just sit on a static screen that says, press start. And if you leave them like that, you're just going to burn that image right into your monitor.
Right.
So a lot of arcade fans have taken to modifying the code so that it will show the attract mode, the normal attract mode, even when it's in free play. And so we install that on the games at ground control for when we have free play nights. And I would love to get good enough at programming to make some of those myself, So it's a fun goal to try to work towards.
Nice. Neato. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
Oh, I feel like I've talked too much already. I think that's just about it as far as Atari, like Atari and computers. I feel like we touched everything. Again, I want to thank. Oh, there is one more thing. While I was at OSU, there was a MIDI conference. This was in 85, 86, maybe, the early days of MIDI. And I got to meet Paul Langston. I went there and I got to meet Paul Langston. He was on the team at Lucasfilm that developed Ball Blazer and Rescue on Fractalus. And I got to interview him a little bit and even got a picture with him. There was another member of the Columbus Atari users group was there. When I moved to Columbus, I stopped going to the Cleveland group, and there was a Columbus group called ASIC, super creative. So I went from CASE to ASIC, the Atari Computer Enthusiasts of Columbus. Anyway, I got to meet Peter Langston, interview him for the user group newsletter. It was published in there. If I can find it, I'll share you a copy.
Please.
It's in a memory box buried somewhere. But the cool thing about that is he told me about the Easter egg in Ball Blazer, which I think is common knowledge now, but during the attract mode, if you type authors on the keyboard, type in the letters to spell the word authors, then the middle line between the two playfields changes to show the names of all the programmers. It was kind of cool to get that little insight at the time.
Nifty. Let's see. I talked to Peter in 2016. Neat. Yeah, it's fun to find those little Easter eggs and things.
Groovy. Yeah, he gave me his card, and if I remember right, he was at AT&T or telecommunications company. He's very learned. I think that covers almost all of it. Oh, and I should also add that while Parrot was a thing, George Morrison of Alpha Systems, I went with him to Detroit to the Atari Magic Expo. Mm-hmm. This was in '87. The ST was becoming a bigger thing then, and I remember demoing Parrot. I had just made the XE version where you could store longer samples in extended memory, and most people just said, "Can you tape a whole song off the radio?" I was like, "No, it's not what it's for." Like, well, what good is it then? This is what I was up against, What I didn't realize is like I had made something for sort of, I guess it was a musical tool, it was a tool for like musicians, I guess, more than just the end user. But that was a fun experience. Somebody actually made a demo about that Atari Magic show in Detroit. That's one of the downloads I've seen around. I had a copy of it. It's like a really early, in vitro, I guess they call them. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that show got one. So yeah, seeing the world thanks to Atari.
Nice. If you could send a message to the people who are still playing with their Atari computers today, and you can right now, what would you tell
them? Don't let anybody tell you that it's not relevant. Even the old 8-bit computers, everything about them applies to modern computing. It's just at a smaller scale. Tiny computing is just as informative and educational and fun. And maybe even more approachable than modern computers sometimes. I I'd say what's in the past is not truly past. It's still here with us as long as we want to keep it here. People should enjoy and take advantage of all levels of technology.
Great
And
answer.
I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I have been given by the people in my life, and giving me access to this technology.